Keeping your immune system strong is essential to maintaining good overall health. That's why I designed Virid. Virid is a specialized, synergistic immune support formula. Virid includes a powerful combination of key nutrients and botanical extracts that provide reinforcement during immune challenges. This synergistic formula helps provide immediate support for the immune system. It boosts protective antioxidant capacity, and it promotes healthy inflammatory balance. Virid includes a blend of key vitamins such as vitamin B5, A, C, and zinc. All are crucial for supporting immune system energy and response. Additionally, it contains botanicals such as black elderberry, echinacea, astragalus, and andrographis. These herbs are known for their traditional immune properties, and they also serve as natural antioxidants. As with all of our formulas, Virid does not contain gluten, and it is also free of allergens derived from yeast, artificial colors, and flavors. For daily prevention, take 1 to 2 capsules a day. For first signs of cold or flu-like symptoms, take 2 to 4 capsules per day. And if you're looking for the ultimate immune support combination, Virid synergizes well with Detox C, Ultra D3, Ultra Q, and NAC, my favorite lineup for immune system support. Everybody, welcome to Big Dr. Osborne's Brain. We got a great live Q&A for you today. If you missed our Christmas special on Tuesday, go back and check that out. Share it with your friends and family. Hopefully you'll get a great kick out of the fun we had with Santa Claus and the reindeer and Frosty. Beyond that, I'm taking your nutrition questions today. So whatever you've got, whatever you want to ask, go ahead and start piping that into the chat box or the feed box, wherever you're watching, and I'll do my best to get as many questions answered in the time as I can. Now, that being said, I think a PSA is in order here for those of you who are dropping like flies. We've had several even in our office this week fall down with colds, flus, and other various winter-related immune problems. And so the questions have come in a lot this week. Dr. Osborne, what can I do? If you want to do something tremendously helpful and supportive to prevent yourself from, falling to it, I recommend Virid. This is what I use right now. I'm taking about 4 of these a day just as a means to help support myself as people around me are falling. So Virid, down the hatch. Okay, so that's my answer to your immune questions. Now, let's dive into your other questions. Let's see here. SA, found out that I have a B12 deficiency through injections and symptoms. After a couple of B12 injections, my symptoms are improving, but I was wondering which cofactors for B12 are vital or important to take. There aren't any cofactors for B12. B12 is an essential nutrient, and so there's nothing that you can take that helps your body make more B12, so there's no cofactor in that sense, and that maybe you misunderstand what a cofactor is, but the best thing you can do is to eat foods that are high in B12. Predominantly, that's going to be animal meat. You can also supplement with B12. I talked about this a few weeks ago. There's actually research that shows that oral sublingual lozenges are about as effective as injections. So if you don't want to inject yourself all the time with B12, consider an oral lozenge of the appropriate or considerable dose. We have something called methylcobalamin, which comes in 5,000 microgram lozenges. And then we have something as well called hydroxycobalamin, which comes in 2,000 microgram lozenges. And so those are both options for those of you looking to just supplement with more B12 and keep your levels on the up and up. Melinda says, the eye doctor says there's no way to prevent retinal tears. I don't understand that question. To prevent retinal tears? Why would you want to prevent tearing? Maybe reframe your question and I can give you a better answer. because the eyes should be able to tear regularly. That's, that's part of their job. What would be the main thing to look for when a 14-year-old female is not growing taller for the past 3 years and has not started menstrual cycle nor showing signs of body hair? Several things. Number one, first and foremost, I'd look at gluten as a potential. We know that gluten can cause polyendocrinopathies, which suppress the ability to produce hormones, and so failure to thrive, failure to grow appropriately, or delayed puberty onset, all been linked to gluten sensitivity in a big way. Other things that can do that, malnutrition. So you want to really have a doctor look at her from a nutritional perspective and do an analysis of her vitamin and mineral status, make sure she's eating adequate calories as well. But those would be the first kind of low-hanging fruit, so to speak, that I would investigate with any kind of teenager that was failing to meet growth standards. Is it possible to make a video on blood analysis? It's possible, but it's not something I'm going to do. I'm not a big fan of blood analysis, the dark field microscopy, as a means to make all the decisions. I think a lot of doctors take a lot of what they find under those dark microscopic fields out of. They postulate a lot of things that are just probably not tremendously accurate. That's not to say that there can't be some benefit from looking at blood under a dark field, but probably not going to do a video on that. What do you think of Akkermansia, a probiotic which is touted for weight loss? I think any product that's touted for weight loss is overrated, and it's basically a distraction for the person taking it from doing the things that they need to do in order to lose the weight they're trying to lose. Weight loss isn't rocket science. Don't eat processed food. Don't eat chemicals that mimic hormones. Cut out things that aren't helpful. Empty calories. Manage your calories appropriately. Exercise. Get sunshine. Go to bed on time. These are the fundamental things that people distract themselves with products like Akkermansia or any other product, again, for that matter, touting weight loss, that distract yourself from doing the things that are necessary to actually achieve sustaining, lifelong, healthy weight. Can you review or offer some guidance on how to decipher the results of an INA test? We have a webinar, Shalene. If you've done our testing, our intracellular nutrition analysis, reach out to our customer support team and ask them to send you a replay link to the webinar. It's probably an hour and a half long, and it will give you a ton of great insights on your test results. Are there any instances where you would not recommend red light therapy and have heard LED lights are bad for the eyes? Comment. There's no instance where I wouldn't recommend red light therapy because there's no danger. There's no contraindications for doing it. Red light therapy, the freest therapy in the world is sunshine. So there's no indication where I would ever tell somebody to avoid sunshine for the sake of fear of illness. Unless you had absolutely no skin pigment, there are certain diseases, albinism, etc., where getting too much sunshine could pose a true risk for you. But red light therapy is very well tolerated by pretty much everyone. Is it more beneficial to take probiotics on an empty stomach? It's ideal to take them at night on an empty stomach. Ideal, but I'd say if you forgot to take them and you're trying to get benefit from them, taking them in the morning with breakfast is still okay. It's still going to have a good effect for you. But in an ideal situation, at night before bed on an empty stomach is ideal. What nutrient could I be deficient in if I have a little white spot on my middle finger nail and I see a tiny dot of white on the other middle finger? It could be mineral deficiency, TC. So zinc is real common. That's called leukonychia. We did a whole show on signs and symptoms on the nails and other physical symptoms of nutrition deficiency, where I dove into a number of the things that you can look for. But selenium is an example, calcium, zinc are examples of nutrient deficiencies that can cause those white spots to appear on your fingernails. How to get rid of Candida? Lots of things, but first and foremost, you have to eat a diet that's not conducive to the overgrowth of Candida. So Candida are fermenters. That means they like to eat carbohydrates. As a matter of fact, they convert your carbs into alcohol. That's one of the toxic side effects of Candida overgrowths. There's actually a name for that. It's called autobrewery, where your gut becomes a brew factory. And so you got to starve it out, and that's reducing carbohydrate content in your diet, especially simple carbohydrates, sugars, processed sugars, dried fruits. Any kind of alcohol is a no-no if you're trying to get Candida to calm down. And then there are a number of different natural things that you can do as well. We have a supplemental called caprylic acid, ultra caprylic acid, which the mechanism of action of caprylic acid is that it embeds in the yeast Candida cell wall, or the membrane around it, and it pokes holes in the membrane, making it harder for yeast to survive. There are a number of herbals: oregano, garlic, horsetail, thyme. All can be very helpful for those with Candida in terms of trying to rebalance the microbiome. So there's a lot of strategies there, Con. You might check out my master class that we did on Candida. It should be in our library. We can post a link maybe to it for you to check that out at a later time. Let's see here. Greetings from Maui. I spent my 50th birthday in Maui. It was a fantastic trip, Tammy. And it was my 50th birthday and my 50th state. So it was pretty cool to go to Maui. Got to surf and see a lot of really, really neat things. It's such a beautiful place. Anyway, hello back to you. I'm 18 weeks pregnant. I have a history of mold exposure and heavy metals. I am in brain fog for years. Can I do anything ahead of time to mitigate the risks for me and my baby? Detox and breastfeeding, ? So you have a history of mold exposure and heavy metals, but the question is, are you still in mold? Because if you're still in brain fog and you're still struggling, there's a strong likelihood you could be in mold, and that's not good. Mold is not good. It's a bad thing. So the number one thing you can do to mitigate risk is to get a proper mold assessment. So hire a good, reputable mold inspector, preferably one that does forensic work in court cases, because the worst thing you could do is spend money on a mold inspector who does an air test. Air tests are garbage science. They all very frequently come out and with false positives, even though there's actually a mold problem. So you don't want to rely. I mean, it's not, I say junk science, maybe that's too strong of a word. You don't want to rely on an air test as a mold inspection. It's part of a mold inspection, but not the only part of a mold inspection. But get somebody out who can do an inspection of your home and make sure your home is safe. Because if you're out of mold, you're going to naturally detox as well. Your body's going to slowly get rid of those mycotoxins as time goes on. You sweat them out, you pee them out, you poop them out. And so there are strategies that certainly can be done with detox, but some of the strategies are limited if you're pregnant. Because you don't want to create problems. Like if you're using binders, for example, like charcoal and zeolite, these are binders. They work great, and they're a good part of a mold detoxification plan. But they can bind minerals, and when you're 18 weeks pregnant and you're trying to eat for 2 and you're trying to mineralize really, really well for the baby's growth, you don't necessarily want to be in the middle of a heavy detoxification process. So number one thing you can do really is to get out of a moldy environment. If you're not sure, get a good mold inspector to do a good job. I don't absorb B12. Is there an alternative other than the shots? Sublingual, Nancy, sublingual. If you don't absorb B12 in your GI tract because of an intrinsic factor problem or a pernicious anemia, you can absorb it through your cheeks using sublinguals. I mentioned methylcobalamin sublinguals and hydroxycobalamin sublinguals earlier with the other B12 question. And maybe we can post a link to our B12 for Nancy, and she can read more about B12. What are your thoughts on the peptide BPC 157 for leaky gut? Body protection compound 157 is not going to resolve a leaky gut. It's a great peptide for recovery, for chronic aches and pains and injuries. We see it work pretty well for people who have like a plaguing arthritic problem. But as far as healing a leaky gut, the only way you're going to heal a leaky gut is to remove what's causing the leaky gut. And if you go back, Lynn, and read my book, No Grain, No Pain, I have an entire chapter on leaky gut. And I have a diagram in the book on the causes of leaky gut. So you have to understand that to get rid of leaky gut, you have to stop the things that are causing it. No amount of any supplement in the world, including BP 157, BTDC 157, is going to fix a problem if you're contributing to the progression of leaky gut with your choices or behaviors. What salad recipe dressing do you use? There's lots of different salad recipe. I mean, for me, I don't really care for a lot of the frill. I just, I'll use some extra virgin olive oil, and I might sprinkle a few pumpkin seeds and a little bit of salt. I'm not big on a lot of salad dressings because most of them have corn-derived white vinegar in them, and so you run into that problem of GMO corn products in your salad dressing. So I just drizzle a little oil on there and stoically go to town. If my ionase test shows slight deficiency in some minerals, would the ultramineral compound be sufficient to take to help bring them up? Yeah, depending on which ones you have, Mary. Ultraminerals is great. It has several minerals in it, but there are a few it doesn't have. It does not contain copper, and it does not contain boron or strontium. So if you're low in those three, it's not gonna cover your bases. But if you're low in others, it will be. If it's just a slight borderline deficit, it would be a good place to start. Can I use non-GMO allulose if I'm gluten-free? I don't recommend allulose that's made from corn, although corn is not the only place allulose comes from. I believe they also make allulose from, I think it's prunes, if I'm not incorrect. I might be wrong. I believe it's prunes though, and a lot of companies are moving toward that because they're becoming more aware that less corn is probably a better thing. What's the best supplements for somebody trying to titrate off of methadone? I think work with your doctor there, but I mean, if you want to do some supplemental support, I would highly recommend vitamin C, and I would highly recommend vitamin B3 in the form of niacin or nicotinic acid. Can prediabetes cause low testosterone? Yes, it absolutely can. Blood sugar elevations will glycate your proteins in your blood, some of those proteins responsible for carrying testosterone, and will diminish the effectiveness of testosterone and contribute to low T. Can you please explain the cause of a type 2 diabetic losing weight versus a type 2 diabetic being overweight? It's the chronicity of it, generally speaking. Now, there's nuance to every case, but if you're early onset type 2 diabetes, there's generally weight gain. If you're late stage type 2 diabetic, there's oftentimes weight loss, and that has to do with the change in the fluctuation in cortisol and insulin over time, and the impact that diabetes has on other tissues and organs. So it varies, and I'm giving you a very rough generalization, but it's, again, early onset. Within the first few years, 5 years or so, we're going to see typically weight gain. As the diabetes gets worse and chronic, we're going to generally tend to see weight loss. My daughter has very red cheeks and red upper arms. Do you think it could be due to gluten? It could be due to a lot of things, but it's possible that gluten might be playing a role. I would just simply say, if you're wanting to know for sure, have her go on a gluten-free diet, and if it improves, you've got an answer. And if it doesn't, you also have an answer. And it's just at that point, dig deeper. I took genetic testing for gluten and am gluten sensitive. I stopped eating grains and dairy a few years ago. How do I know if I can eat dairy again? I would, if you're curious and not sure, I would take food sensitivity testing to determine whether or not you're having a problem with dairy. And if you're not, then, you know, you could consider introducing dairy. Keep in mind that it needs to be A2 dairy, and also keep in mind that I think it's about 60% of people with gluten sensitivity are dairy intolerant or lactose intolerant. So it's not the same thing as an allergy or sensitivity, but one of the prolonged problems many have with dairy after going gluten-free is that the gluten over their lifetime damaged their intestinal lining and made it impossible, or not impossible, made it more difficult to properly produce the enzymes that help to degrade dairy sugars. So that enzyme is called lactase, and you need it to break down lactose, which is the sugar found in dairy. We have, it's those of you that struggle with that problem and you want to have some dairy on the holidays and you're not allergic to it, you know, you might consider using, we have something called Dairy Shield, which is rich in the enzymes that help to degrade the dairy. Are there any non-dairy cheeses that don't have corn products? I think there's a couple. I don't typically use these products, Nancy, so I wouldn't be the best person to ask because I just don't keep up to speed. I don't like processed substitute foods. I'm just not a fan of that stuff because it's, you know, even if it gives you the same texture or mouthfeel or taste, it's, you know, to get it to do that, you had to take it through some pretty nasty processing. And that, you know, what we're learning more and more about the processing of food is, you know, the more ultra processed you make it, not so good. It's the worse it becomes for you. Is taking high doses of fish oil bad for your health? Define high doses, Terry. 2 to 3, even up to 4 grams of concentrated EPA DHA that's been properly tested for heavy metals and other contaminants is perfectly fine for most people, and it's not bad for your health. It can actually be very beneficial. Can mismanaged MTHFR cause POTS syndrome or histamine intolerance? No, there's no such thing as mismanaged MTHFR. God, I wish the ignorance on the internet would stop promoting MTHFR as an illness. For those of you that don't know, MTHFR is a genetic SNP, single nucleotide polymorphism. MTHFR stands for methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. It's a gene that is responsible for methylating folate. Folate is a B vitamin. It's vitamin B9. And for it to function in the body, it has to be properly methylated. If you have an MTHFR mutation, you have a disadvantage at methylating folate, but a disadvantage is not the same thing as an inability to do so. And so where MTHFR problems show up is not because you're mismanaging the problem, because MTHFR in and of itself is not a problem. It's when you surround yourself with an environment that's very toxic, full of garbage foods, that you put that gene system under duress. And now if you are at a disadvantage, it won't work as efficiently as someone without that mutation. And so symptoms can start to manifest. The problem isn't the gene. The problem is the behavior. And if you change the behavior, you can quit thinking about MTHFR and trying to blame it on health issues, because it is not something you blame health issues on. It is something that that poor choices in lifestyle and bad behaviors can stress and create illness as a result of that environmental stress, not so much because you have bad genes. Remember, your genes are a gift from God. They're not a curse. And that includes all of you that have done all this genetic testing and you've been told you have all these genetic variants and you need to supplement with 55 pills because you have horrible genes. That's all BS. So anyway, I hope that clears it up for you. Is there a correlation between H. pylori and having ectopic heartbeats? None that I know of, George. So can't say I've ever read anything or seen any research making that correlation. How long does it take to correct vitamin deficiencies? I'm deficient in B1 and vitamin D. It depends on the scope of, of the dose that you're taking. It depends on how deficient you are. It depends on how long you've been deficient. It depends on if you have any other underlying pre-existing conditions that would tap or tax those nutrients. For example, if you're taking a diuretic and for your blood pressure, it causes vitamin B1 deficiency. And so if you're taking vitamin B1 to correct a deficiency, but still using a diuretic that causes it, it's a whole ball of worms, right? So there's a nuance to how long to answer that question. You're talking about a relatively healthy person who doesn't have any other kind of confounding variables in their environment. Several months, 2 to 3 months is a pretty good framework for trying to correct a nutritional deficiency, again, depending on whether it's water or fat soluble. But generally speaking, if you're deficient in a nutrient, what I do, just so you know, this is what I do in my practice. I put people on 6-month protocols based on their chemical INA results. So an INA, intracellular nutrition analysis, measuring deficiencies intracellularly. And the reason why we do 6-month protocols for people is because the cells that we use to measure, to do the test, are lymphocytes, and they have a 6-month lifespan. So we have this nice, really pretty window of the last 6 months. And so I want to support that person for a solid 6 months to get beyond that deficiency before retesting. Is there a correlation? Okay, answered that one. Do you have choline citrate? Yes, Brenda, we have something called ultra choline. If you go to Gluten-Free Society, you just type that in, you'll find it. Phenomenal choline product. Oh, okay. So Melinda's, I read tears and she meant tears. Okay, so you're talking about tears, retinal tears specifically, without a retinal detachment. I have seen people's retinal tears heal. Now, that being said, I'm not an ophthalmologist, I'm not an optometrist, and this is not a treatment recommendation, but I have seen people with severe food allergies, gluten sensitivities, mold exposures, other environmental exposures. When we deal with those things, and then they go follow up with their eye doctors, their retinal tears are gone. I've seen that actually relatively frequently. So I know it's possible. That being said, what are the specifics of your background? There's not like a particular one-off product that I would recommend, although I would strongly encourage you to have your vitamin and mineral status measured, because one of the common nutrient deficiencies we see associated with retinal damage is vitamin A deficiency. And so vitamin A, may have a profound effect on vision and eye tissue. But you need zinc to carry vitamin A to the eye. So a lot of times we'll also see zinc deficiency contributing to a vitamin A deficiency. And so if you haven't had those things measured, I strongly recommend that you do. When will multi-nutrients, so both of our multi and ultra nutrients, we have 2 multivitamin products that have been out of stock. Multi-nutrients will be back in a couple weeks, and ultra nutrients, I believe, will be back next week. So we're really excited because it's been, unfortunately, too long for these products to be out of stock. But the problem was, for those of you who are frustrated, and I apologize for this, but there was an issue with the production because of a product contamination. And so we're not going to let anything bad get to you. So, when something like that happens in our facility, it's a no-go. That we send the ingredients back, and then we have to source ingredients that are clean. And so this is the benefit of having internal testing on all of our products, but also third-party testing after the fact. So we just won't let anything that's not good get to you. If creatine came back high, you mean creatinine? I misread that. Sorry, Kara. If creatinine came back high in the urine test, should the kidneys be checked? Possibly, depends. Creatinine can be artificially high if you work out a lot. And so there are different things that can elevate your creatinine that aren't necessarily kidney damage. It's never a bad idea if you're not sure. Creatinine is a measure. You can also have your blood urea nitrogen checked. And then they can calculate from these things, they can calculate your glomerular filtration rate. And then another really good kidney function test that insurance should cover is something called cystatin C, cystatin, and then the capital C. So those are all good ways to look at kidney function. You can also look at prealbumin, and you can do a urine test. And if you're spilling protein out, that can also be a sign of kidney problems as well. I feel like my eyesight's degrading, and I'm wondering about things I can do to boost and support my eyesight. I mean, if you just want a good, solid nutritional support product that just for eyes in general, Shalene, we have something called Focus, Focus. Maybe we can put a link up for Shalene. And that's just a good eye formula. But if your eyesight's degrading because of some other issue, we see a lot of vision disturbance and degradation in people who have mold exposure. So you might look into that. I mean, that's like to me, when I see somebody's vision start to deteriorate at a quick pace, mold is always at the top of my list of suspicions. I have bronchitis, but don't want to take antibiotics. Will I be able to get over this? I mean, I can't give you treatment recommendation, Robert. That's something that you need to talk to your doctor about. But I mean, sometimes bronchitis is self-limiting, meaning if your immune system is strong and your body can handle it and you get over it, and you don't have to take antibiotics. Your body's not a weakling. But sometimes it can get out of control and it can be problematic. So, it's hard for me being here and you being where you're at to make any kind of major determination for you in that regard. So I can't really answer your question specifically, but there are a lot of good things you can do to support your body's ability to recover. Can we put a link in for Robert? We have an immune protocol that we encourage people to use, when they're struggling like that. And you can check it out and make a good decision. Again, get with your doctor as well. Can I take grapefruit seed extract if I have gastritis? Typically, yes. There's not a contraindication. Is it okay to use organic wheatgrass powder if one is gluten intolerant? I don't recommend it, Cindy. I see too many people reacting that are gluten intolerant to wheatgrass. So it's just not something I recommend. I just bought your book, No Grain, No Pain. It says it helps with pain, but could this help with psoriasis, scalp psoriasis? Any advice? It could, yeah. Psoriasis, scalp psoriasis, skin disorder, which is an autoimmune condition. And, the book, No Grain, No Pain is a roadmap to helping people with autoimmune disease recover. So it absolutely is possible that it could help. Is trigger finger a symptom of nutrient deficiency? It can be. Vitamin D is an example of a frequently found nutrient deficiency in those with trigger finger. But in my experience too, trigger finger very frequently is long-standing side effect where you get basically in the ligaments and or tendons, you get kind of an adhesion that forms that creates the trigger finger and causes that stickiness when you're trying to extend or flex the finger. And that very frequently is, over time, it's high blood sugar over time, drives glycation changes in the tissue that lead to that stickiness or to that clicking or sticking. A healthy 40-year-old male with buzzing torso nerves and a positive ANA due to vaccines when in the Army. What can I do? I think you should get a workup done. I mean, if you're having neuropathy, you got to figure out what's driving it. I mean, maybe it was and maybe it wasn't the shot. I'm not saying it wasn't, I'm not saying it was, but it could be other things. You could have neuropathy for a lot of different reasons. And if your ANA is positive, it means you developed an autoimmune condition. And, autoimmunity is nothing to play around with. So generically speaking, follow the diet and no grain, no pain. And if it helps, fantastic. Get back with me and let me know. But ultimately, if you've got problems like that, you want to get it looked at. I'd say work with a functional doctor that understands root cause resolution so that they can help you figure out what's driving the problem. My sister-in-law thinks my mom should be able to have gluten occasionally. She says she's not celiac. Which of your podcasts might change her mind? Sounds like my mom should be gluten genetic tested. It's not up to you to change your sister's mind. Look, if you're gluten sensitive and you eat gluten and you do it consistently enough, well, first of all, 1 breadcrumb is enough gluten to cause inflammation for 2 months. So good luck with that eating it occasionally thing, because occasionally turns into frequently. And the definition of occasionally is so esoteric for most people. I ask one person, what does it mean to do something occasionally? And they'll tell me, well, I just do it on the weekends, which is, if it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that's 3 days out of 7, which is like 46% of your total week. That's not an occasional. That's a skewed definition. And then some people say occasionally is once a week or once every couple of weeks. But again, 1 breadcrumb, inflammation for 2 months. So occasionally is a bad idea if your definition falls under that rim. But the other thing that we know is that gluten consumption in people with gluten issues, consistently done, increases risk of early mortality by 400%. If you want to play Russian roulette, that's on you. I mean, no judgment from me, but that to me is a bad idea. And, celiac disease is not worse than gluten sensitivity. That's the myth, is that somehow if you have celiac, it's worse. It's not. It's no worse. You can develop neuropathy because of gluten and never have celiac disease. So it's a relative thing, right? Would you rather have neuropathy or would you rather have gastrointestinal inflammation? Depends on who you ask, right? Some people with painful neuropathy would trade that pain for gut inflammation any day of the week and vice versa. So remember, gluten is an equal opportunity tissue destroyer. It doesn't have to manifest as celiac disease. There are 100 or so diseases that we know gluten can either cause or contribute to, pretty much any form of autoimmune disease. So to me, that's just bad advice from somebody who's not real clear on what gluten sensitivity really is in relationship to celiac disease. But if your mom is on the fence and trying to make the best decision, Kersey, she should get genetically tested so that she can have a solid answer and make a solid decision based on her own objective data from her own genetics. Since being grain-free 18 months and being healed of leaky gut, I have gained 5 pounds. I think this could be because I'm now absorbing my nutrients. Yeah, absolutely. Healthy weight gain can be a consequence of changing your diet. Fastest ways to heal psoriasis and nail deformity are to find out what's driving it. And I say that because so many people will go on the internet and do a bunch of research, and they'll try a little of this for a while, they'll try a little of that for a while, and they'll kind of bat around different things for, a year or 2 years, and they won't get anywhere. Bypass all that, get properly tested, get you a good functional doctor, get properly tested. Psoriasis has triggers, and it's different for different people. You could take 1,000 psoriatic cases, and they would have psoriasis all for different reasons. And so there's no one-size-fits-all approach. The closest one-size approach that I could give you is to follow the diet and no grain, no pain. It was designed and based on decades of experience in seeing autoimmunity, including things like psoriatic arthritis, psoriasis, improve or go away with diet and lifestyle change. What can I do if capsule probiotics, even spore-based or SIBO yogurt recipe gave me gas and diarrhea? There's a variety of different reasons why that could be the case. You could be, some people develop a side effect from a probiotic because they have microbial imbalance in their gut. So there may be a bad bacteria in you, there may be a yeast or fungal overgrowth. And so when you take that probiotic, it's going to war with those other species inside your gut. And so there can be a temporary kind of side effect profile that occurs in that first 1 to 2 weeks of the beginning of starting something. And so a lot of people, when they have those kinds of symptoms, get scared and they think, oh, I'm allergic or I'm reacting to the product, when in fact, you're really just having a Herxheimer response. Now, whether that's happening to you or not, I don't know, but that's a possibility. I mean, I'd say if you really want to know, get tested, get your microbiome and analyzed and see what's going on in there. Cutaneous mastocytosis, what could be the cause? Well, I would say it's most likely an environmental exposure. A lot of times with something like that, it's mold, environmental exposure to mold and mycotoxins. I would also be concerned with, with other environmental immune triggers that you might be being exposed to. So get good testing to determine if those things are happening. And, and then beyond that, it's about testing. Look, I can't emphasize this enough. A lot of your answers, if you've been struggling chronically and you've tried lots of different things and you aren't figuring it out, it's because your issue isn't going to be easy. It's not going to be a magic bullet fix. It's not going to be one thing that you do or one big change that you make, because it's multifactorial. And in cases like that, when it's multifactorial, I see people struggle 5-10 years before they even call my office. Don't do that. Don't put yourself through 5 years plus of, trying to do things yourself and do your research, because you're missing key elements. Now, look, do research and get educated. I'm not discouraging education, but when it comes to complex things that aren't changing when you're changing, then you're missing something. And the best way to identify that is to stop guessing and start testing. I went on a 6-month mold detox for taking protocol, taking itraconazole twice a day. I retested at the end of 6 months, and unfortunately, my levels didn't improve. Some got worse. So let's define that, Maria. If you're talking about a mold detox protocol, okay. So first of all, there's 3 elements to mold. This is such a misunderstood topic. You can have a mold infection. Okay, so itraconazole is an antifungal used by doctors, prescribed by doctors to treat mold growing on you or in you. So if you've got, for example, mold colonizing your sinus cavities or colonizing your GI tract, like a candidiasis or a geotrichum or rhodotorula molds, which are common human molds that will overgrow and create problems. This is where drugs like itraconazole and other azole antifungals are prescribed. It's to treat a mold infection, okay, or what's called a mycosis. That's a mold infection. That's not the same thing as a mold detox. When people use the term mold detox, if you're talking about detox, you're getting out of the environment where you're being exposed to the mold, and then you're detoxifying the toxins that mold from your environment produce, that you absorb through your airways and that you absorb through your skin, that you were exposed to. So those are called mycotoxins. Mycotoxins, not the same thing as a mold infection. Remember, mycotoxins are the poison that mold produces. Mold is a microorganism that can grow on you or grow in you, but also can grow in your home. So if you're talking about a mold mycotoxin detoxification, where your doctor had you on binding agents and liver support agents, that's for mycotoxins typically, not for mold. Now, itraconazole is for a mold infection. So if you were being treated with itraconazole, but you were being told you have a mycotoxin issue, then they were treating you with the wrong thing. So again, I can't comment because I don't know what was in the doctor's brain. I don't know more about your history or what was going on. But I see this happen a lot, where somebody's got mycotoxin exposure and their doctor's treating with an antifungal, and they're not, so they're approaching it wrong. They're trying to treat mold growth on a person when in fact they should be actually going after the mold toxins that have built up in a person. So that being said, it's maybe I just don't have enough information, but you've got to get clear on what you actually have. And maybe you are, and maybe I misread your question, but from what you said, you don't detox from a mold infection. You treat a mold infection generally with azole antifungals or other things. You detox from mycotoxicosis or mycotoxin exposure. Is there a way one can determine if they have knocked out a tooth infection? Dentists insist on root canals, so I won't go. My own treatment has been effective in elimination of symptoms. Well, get you a cone beam x-ray from a good biological dentist. It's a special imaging device that can help you see the potential for an infection underneath the tooth. So that's one way to help know. So get with a good dentist that does that, that's not pushing a root canal. I agree. I'm not a fan of root canals. There are times where a root canal can be helpful, but as a general rule of thumb, for most people, root canals, in my opinion, you're killing you're killing the root of the tooth, and then you're leaving a dead tooth in your mouth that maybe already has an infection. And so now, what do bacteria like to do? They like to decay materials, and if the material's already dead and doesn't have an immune system, then it's just a breeding ground for more bacterial problems to occur. Is there a specific supplement or food or therapy or imaging you'd recommend for diagnosed with onset colorectal cancer? So you have colorectal cancer. You got, work with an expert in cancer. And if you kind of, lean more toward the natural, I would say there's a clinic, Dr. Tony Jimenez. If I had a family member with cancer, that's where I would go. But they have a place called Hope for Cancer, and work with somebody who understands cancer really well. But there's not a magic bullet there. There are a lot of cancer is a multifactorial, multivariable phenomena, and taking this supplement or that supplement's not necessarily going to solve it. And you need to work with people who know what they're doing. Is there anything other than DAO that can help support histamine intolerance? Yeah, we have a product called Hist Assist, and it's a mixture of different things that help to support the stabilization of mast cells so they are not as aggressive in their histamine release. So if you haven't looked at that, Lorraine, we can put a link up for you and you can check that out. I think I might have PMDD. What can help? If you mean premenstrual dysphoric disorder, then you need a nutrient test, because a lot of PMDD is magnesium deficiency, B vitamin deficiency, iodine deficiency. Very commonly, that's what is driving those symptoms around the cycle. So micronutrient testimony would be a good place to start. Outside of that, it gets more nuanced, and there are other tests that can be helpful, but I would start there. Is endometriosis linked to gluten? Yes, it absolutely can be. Can you get rid of trigger finger without surgery? Yeah, I have seen people resolve their trigger finger with diet change. So you can. It's definitely possible. What are the best ways to do a kidney cleanse safely? What are you cleansing? What are you trying to cleanse? Cleanses are great if you have a goal in mind, but a generic cleanse, what are you cleansing? If you're talking about kidney stones, what kind of stone? Is it an oxalate stone? Is it calcium oxalate? Because if it's calcium oxalate, then you need to go on a low oxalate diet. And then you also need to have your microbiome assessed, because there are bacteria that can help you break down oxalate. Oxalate's also formed by yeast overgrowth. So you might have a yeast overgrowth. Yeast species will produce oxalates and can contribute to the formation of stones and oxalate deposition into your tissues, etc. So you can do all the kidney cleanses in the world, and if you don't address the core of why the stones are forming in the first place, good luck. I would say, Basira, if you want to learn more about oxalate, if you do have oxalate stones, we have a whole crash course on that, and I would strongly recommend that you go check it out. Maybe we can put a link up for Basira on our oxalate crash course. Opinion on non-invasive technology using near-infrared lasers, embedded waveform from mixing and frequency modulation, kilohertz high frequency range to regrow tooth bone cartilage, induce cell proliferation. Um, I'm not an expert in tooth regrowth and infrared therapies or wave-based therapies. I know they're, like as also a bone, we've done infrared and microcurrent using bone stimulators, like on long bones in people. And those things work really, really well. I can't imagine the tooth would be very much different, but I'm just not the expert on tooth regrowth. It's just not my field. So it's not something I could say, hey, use this type of light laser at this frequency or at this wavelength. Would you recommend regular flushing niacin or non-flushing? I like flushing niacin. Works better. Are you aware of any possible causes for being a hoarder? Yeah, I mean, it's a mental disorder for sure. And I would suspect for most hoarders, again, it's not like I'm the expert on hoarding, but I would suspect that for many of them, B vitamin deficiencies are playing a role in their mental illness. Eating the wrong food, many of them are in mold, and especially once they start hoarding and they've got their walls are stacked high. My grandfather, my step grandfather was a hoarder. And I remember when I was a kid, we went to clean his house when he passed away, and there's so much mold and feces because there were animals in the home, and it just newspapers stacked everywhere and all kinds of garbage stacked everywhere that was just growing mold on it. And so I would say that a lot of these people are being exposed to biological microorganisms that can definitely cause inflammatory brain issues, and that there's definitely a possibility that inflamed brain could create neurological changes that lead to personality changes and anxiety and other types of repetitive or compulsive behaviors like hoarding. I have an IgG test and I'm not send for coffee. What does that say? I can't even read that. I have an IgG test and I'm not send for coffee casein. I drink it. You got to rephrase that question, Abdul, because I'm just not sure what you're asking. My granddaughter broke an ankle plate in her ankle. I have celiac disease. Is it possible she has CD because she broke her ankle plate in her gymnastics class? It's possible she's got CD because she's directly related to you. And it's a very high percentage of familial celiac disease. So if one direct family member has it, the odds that the others have it is extremely high. So it's definitely a possibility. But gymnastics is also a very intense sport. It's possible she broke her ankle plate. And did the ankle plate break, or so the plate broke, or did the plate break off the bone? Again, there's some clarity necessary there for me to answer that question more effectively, because if the plate broke off the bone because her bone's brittle and starting to turn osteoporotic, I mean, because you can get aggressive osteoporosis and celiac disease at a young age, that's a possibility. But if the plate itself broke, it's just possible that the stressors and rigor of gymnastics was too much and the plate broke because of the pressure. Hard to say. Macular degeneration. Do you have a recommendation for macular degeneration in footers? You have to change your diet. A lot of macular degeneration is high carbohydrate diets driving damage to the eye tissues. So you've got to change your diet, and then outside of that, you've got to get nutritionally tested so that you know what nutrient deficits may be playing a role in your eye's deterioration. But we see a lot of zinc and vitamin A and biotin deficiency, and a lot of magnesium deficiency and chromium and vanadium deficiency in people with eye inflammation issues. Have a huge floater and retinal tear in the field and view and impacts vision on one eye. Man, I would say any of you that have repetitive floaters, check your blood sugar. If it's too high, that's a big one. It's glycated proteins folding abnormally, creating those floaters in your vitreous humor in your eye field. beyond that, I see mold a whole lot cause floaters. So, carbohydrate diet, mold are two big ones. A low output ozone generator for mold prevention. I wouldn't use it. Ozone destroys the materials in the fabrics of your household items. So, like, let's say, for example, you were using a low output ozone generator. That ozone is going to interact with the silicone around the seals of your bathroom and doors. It's going to interact with any kind of plastics or latex, and it's going to make those things over time. It's going to aggressively crumble them and destroy them. Ozone, in my opinion, is just not helpful. It's not useful, even low output, as a mold preventative agent. The number one mold preventative agent is moisture control, period. End of story. Everything else is BS. Everything else is a pipe dream. If you don't control water, you're not going to control mold. And that's just been my experience over the last several decades and seeing so many people with mold illness, including my own self and family. On that note, as a matter of fact, let's do this real quick. I told you I had a special announcements to make. And so this past weekend, I was at a conference. It was actually at a non-for-profit called Malachi's Message, which is a fantastic organization that raises money for the awareness of mold illness, but also raises money for people who have been displaced from their homes because of toxic mold in their homes. And so I was a keynote speaker for this event. And we actually launched the trailer for our upcoming movie. So those of you who haven't or weren't there, we'll go ahead and let's cue that up. And I'm going to show you. This is it's a first on YouTube in public. So you guys are only the second group of folks to see this trailer. But here it comes. It's called Mold Jacked. Stay tuned. Here it comes. It killed my dog, it made my son and I sick, my wife almost died. There's no doubt in my mind, had we stayed in that home, we'd all be dead now.
That first week, we all started to have something go wrong.
My 10-year-old was having migraine headaches.
I had a lot of abdominal cramping. My stomach was constantly in pain.
I thought my wife was going crazy.
Chronic symptoms. Countless diagnoses, no clear answers. All the while, the real cause is hiding in plain sight. Microscopic mold toxins poisoning the very air you breathe. Mold illness is like a multi-headed hydra. Mold and mycotoxins act like this mythical beast, mimicking other illnesses, each head representing a different disease. They can disguise themselves as joint pain, brain fog, neuropathy, skin rashes, memory loss, unending fatigue, and so much more.
Mold exposure, the next great epidemic.
NIOSH and OSHA have said that at least 50% of the buildings in the U.S. are water damaged.
Families across the nation, including dozens of people at JBLM, who say they are dealing with black mold in their homes that is...
We begin tonight with a growing
families.
list of applicants in Allulose
Assistant
County.
Secretary.
If the home would have been built correctly, this wouldn't have happened.
The landlord was lying to us, and they did sloppy remediation.
The company the landlord chose to do the work, they weren't licensed.
Instead of fixing the issues, they chose to show up with buckets of bleach and bottles of Kills.
I mean, we know it's intentional. We know that there is a big pharma, big construction, big industry, big insurance movement to quell information about toxic exposures.
Brand new house is gorgeous, rotting from the inside out.
And yet, there is hope.
Even within a few weeks, the kids get sometimes dramatically better.
Human dignity is worth far more than any amount of money that a defendant has.
There is no better feeling in the world to know that you truly have the opportunity to help someone.
My biggest hope, my biggest motivation, my biggest inspiration is the patient. and I think they're ultimately going to lead the revolution.
Doctors, lawyers, mold professionals, and people like you are coming together and joining forces, sharing their experiences, resources, and fighting back. The forces of light coming together to battle the darkness of illness and corruption. My family and I recovered, and so will yours. Join us, and together we can stop the madness and prevent the world from being mold-jacked. Welcome back. Love your commentary in the chat if you enjoyed the trailer. But that's what we've got coming this year. I told you in 2025 it's going to be big on mold, because mold is the next greatest epidemic that us in the United States and many other industrialized countries are facing. The infrastructure is rotting, and it's being built improperly. And poor we'll just say low-skilled workers and high-speed profits are driving the construction of houses that are responsible for maiming and hurting families. And we hope to shed light on that in this next year to help all of you understand it better. So let's get back. We got just a few more minutes for a couple more questions here. Would removing a root canal since childhood, that I've had since childhood from an accident, help with autoimmune disease? Maybe, maybe not. It's hard to say for sure. I'd say get a cone beam x-ray of the root canal itself and see if there's an infection in the tooth or under it. And if that's the case, you probably want to consider getting it removed. But if you don't see anything problematic, maybe not. Usually root canals that are done as a result of trauma to the tooth are less problematic than root canals that are performed as a result of poor hygiene or infection of a tooth. It's when that tooth is infected, and when they do root canals, those are the ones that generally tend to fail and contribute to big problems. Do you think a 3-day fast could eliminate mycotoxins? No. The only thing that's going to eliminate mycotoxins is time, binders, something called biotransformation, supporting the liver's ability to mobilize it and get it out of you, and not being re-exposed to mycotoxins. So not gonna make those go away. Can nerves connected to the stomach be causing discomfort and reaction to yogurt or yellow food coloring? I would say it's probably not nerves connected to the stomach causing the problem so much as it is the irritation from the food that you're eating, creating the irritation to the nerve, which is transmitting the discomfort. So remove the food, remove the irritation. Let's see, what else can I try? I'm dairy and grain free for a year, avoiding food sensitivities, but still struggling with psoriasis. You need to get checked for mold. Psoriasis can be a skin manifestation of environmental mold exposure, Tammy. So I highly recommend you go that route. I've seen a report that EMF can react badly to mold in the brain, body. Is there any truth to this? It's too soon to tell, Chelsea. I mean, I've seen studies on mold being suppressed, mold growth being suppressed by EMF. I know there's a lot of people out there saying that mold is actually stimulated and made stronger by EMF, but I haven't seen any research that corroborates those claims. I think we don't know at this point. I think it's too soon. We don't have enough data on it. My cousin went into diabetic ketosis and was in the ICU for 4 days. She was feeling better, but woke up one morning with intense burning and pain in her legs and hips. It's too complicated to give you any kind of guidance. There's just not enough context there. I mean, if she's diabetic, I would say the best place to start would be with diet and lifestyle change, possibly some supplementation, to get the blood sugar under control. It's amazing how much improvement people see when they just eat well. Let's see, my teenager is experiencing dizziness and high pulse. Any ideas? Lots of them. She could be allergic to food. So food allergies, subacute allergies can drive up the pulse and cause dizziness. Depends if the dizziness and the high pulse is intermittent or if it's constant. There's some context and clues that I don't have that could mean different things. But I would always start with food. I would always look at nutritional status in someone that has mysterious symptoms for no reason, or at least perceptively for no reason. What do you think about buying grounding products? Do they work? I think they can work. I think grounding is a good idea. Grounding sheets and grounding mats can be helpful, but so can going and walking outside barefoot. Okay. Scroll down in the middle and scroll down on the left. Severe migraines and vomiting with menstrual cycle, get nutrient tested, and get with somebody to figure out diet changes that are necessary. I've seen gluten do that. I've seen dairy do that. I've seen sugars do that. I've seen other foods do that. I've seen pesticides do that. There are a lot of potential triggers there, Kara, for migraine like that. And menstrual cycles are generally not the cause, but the menstrual cycle is a stress point in your month that puts your body over the edge. We do have a show on headaches and migraines that you might consider watching to get more of an idea about triggers in detail. Yeah, Shonda, back to the question about the diabetic ketosis and the hospitalization of the daughter. I get second and third opinions. I don't have a clear history or picture of the medicines that she's on, but it's, medicines can absolutely create side effects, and there could be something to that. If that's your suspicion, if that's what your gut's telling you, then I would definitely encourage you to get another opinion. Any remedy for aplastic anemia? Sometimes aplastic anemia is caused by B12 deficiency or folate deficiency. Sometimes it's caused by parasitic infection. Sometimes it's caused by mold, DNA, RNA suppression. So I would look at all those as potential possibilities. Oh, okay. Now the story's coming out. I'm sorry, guys. I'm reading the stream here. So the girl in the hospital with diabetic ketosis is a vegetarian. Yeah, she hit her B12 limit most likely, and it caused the paralysis. It caused the demyelinization in her nerves, and it took her down. A lot of these folks going vegetarian, especially if it's not suited for them genetically, they have about 18 months of vitamin B12 stored in the liver, and when that's gone, the B12 deficiency is going to set in like a hammer, and it's going to cause severe ataxia, dizziness. It can cause vertigo. It can cause neuropathy. It can cause ascending paralysis. It can cause demyelinization. It can cause anxiety. It can cause energy problems, shortness of breath. It can cause anemias that lead to oxygen deprivation to the brain and can put somebody into comas. So it probably, I definitely get her B12 levels checked, but they'll want to check her serum B12, and serum B12 is not super accurate. But do it anyway. But I would also get an INA and intracellular nutrient analysis, and I'd also have her methylcobalamin, or rather, sorry, I would have her homocysteine and her methylmalonic acid levels checked, and as well as her transcobalamin levels. So I would do a full workup on B12 with her and rule that out as a potential possibility. But, you know, in my opinion, the rhetoric around promoting vegetarianism to children, it just creates so much travesty in families and wrecks so many people's health. And, you know, the way the media and all these, we'll just say it very bluntly, these assholes that are after your money, and then they want to buy up farmland, and they want to grow shitty food for your kids to eat, and they want to market that shitty food for your kids to eat, but then accuse your kids of destroying the planet and put the fear of God in them for eating animal meat and call them evil and bad for wanting to have a steak. That rhetoric has to go away. These people are dangerous, and they're causing irreparable harm to families and the health of the youth of our children. Let's see. If I've been taking Tylenol every day for 2 years excessively, will I have serious detox symptoms? I mean, you probably have liver damage. Get an ultrasound of your liver. Tylenol is toxic to the liver in high doses over long periods of time. I'm not saying if you took a Tylenol for a headache that you're going to have liver damage tomorrow, but if you've been taking strong doses of it, you know, every day for 2 years, you know, the Tylenol poisoning is a very real thing. I mean, get an ultrasound of your liver, have your liver enzymes checked by your doctor, and consider using N-acetylcysteine to support your liver from that. Thoughts on eating Greek yogurt? I think Greek yogurt is a marketing term. You know, everybody is like, if it's Greek yogurt, it's somehow healthy. It depends on what the dairy is produced from. It depends on what the cows that are responsible for giving the dairy are fed. And there's a lot of nuance to that. Is it A1 or A2? What kind of cultures are in it? Are there any other added ingredients to the product? I don't think we could just, you know, I don't think we could just use the term Greek yogurt and all of a sudden stamp healthy on it. So hopefully that's helpful for you. Do I have a list of doctors that I have trained in treating causes or decrease with diet? Look, I've trained a lot of doctors over the years. For 8 years, I ran a conference and trained doctors annually. And the reason I don't have a list is because we used to have a list, and we put it up, and people would go see these doctors, and then I'd come back and I'd find out that the training we gave these doctors, they were dismissing the training, and they were using my name as a stepping stone to build their careers and their reputations. And so I took the list down because I just couldn't have people out there using my name to forward themselves without using the sound principles of functional medicine to help their patients. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. A lot of doctors are not qualified to practice functional medicine, and do because there's a market for it, and so they're just trying to. They're in it for the money, and they're not in it for the people. And I've always learned, and I grew up, money comes when you help people, right? Money comes as a reward for bringing value to the world. It's a consequence of bringing value. But if you're chasing money, good luck. Your reputation, everything will be based on whether or not you're going to earn or whether you're not going to earn, and that's going to lead to greed and corruption. Anyway, that's not what this show's about. But I don't have a list. Bottom line. Let's scroll down on the right. If a diabetic of 15 years got gangrene and had some tissue in their foot removed and a toe, is there a probability of them getting gangrene again? Yeah. Is the diabetes controlled? you got to control the diabetes. The gangrene sets in because the vasculature in the distal extremity is not delivering micronutrients, oxygen, and blood efficiently. And so a cut or a scrape leads to bacterial exposures. And if the blood flow is not good and the vasculature is not good, then the immune system can't make its way to that tissue. And so gangrene can definitely set in. So you can reverse that risk by controlling the diet and controlling the diabetes. But if you don't get the diabetes under control, it's over, game over. The gangrene is probably not just a likelihood, but it's probably an inevitability. That's why a lot of diabetics lose their feet. That's why a lot of them end up on dialysis, because those very small blood vessels are, you know, in the glomeruli, the kidney, the functional unit of the kidney. Those are very tiny blood vessels, and they're traumatically affected by blood sugar being too high over time. That's one of the reasons why diabetics generally end up on dialysis and end up with gangrene and infection and amputation of limbs and heart attacks and eye damage, because the vessels in those areas are very tiny and most affected by that elevated sugar. I'm 61, thought I was healthy, been diagnosed with peripheral artery disease, early stage. I don't want a stent. Please help. You got to get you got to get a good functional doc, Kaylee. You know, I mean, if stents fail, a really good cardiologist to check out on that topic is Dr. Jack Wolfson. He's actually a member of our board of advisors at Gluten-Free Society, but he ran a cardiology unit for years before he said this is insanity and left. He walked away from it. Multi-million-dollar career, walked away from it because he knew he wasn't helping people. Causes of high hemoglobin with low iron: dehydration, most likely. If it's not too painful to talk about, could I ask what symptoms your dog was experiencing before dying? Yeah, it's not too painful. It's been a number of years, but she was having a lot of vomiting, super tired and lethargic. Her bowel movements weren't functioning, and so we'd find vomit everywhere. Sometimes we'd find diarrhea, and then her appetite just completely went away. And the vets were stumped; they couldn't figure it out. But her organs were failing. So those were the main ones. Now they also lose their hearing and their vision in mold. And so if your dog, is going blind, and there's no other real reason why that should be happening, like, I'm not talking about a dog that's like 16 years old and has some eyesight loss. I'm talking about younger dogs losing their vision or losing their hearing. How do you feel about Kennedy being part of Trump's cabinet? I think it's good. I think it's good if we can get somebody in there, if we can get him, first of all, if we can get him past the nomination stage and into the confirmation stage, I think he'll do great things to help progress the health of Americans and actually charge the FDA and the CDC for their original jobs, which was to protect the Americans and not to take money from the companies that they're supposed to be watch guarding, because that's what it's become, right? It's just become a revolving racket where the people aren't being protected, and we're all being told what to do and what's healthy and what's not healthy. And it's wrong, because if it were right, we'd be the healthiest country in the world, not the sickest country in the world. And a lot of people on here are saying, do the opposite of the government recommendations. And I would say that's a sad place that we're in, but it's probably closer to true than not. Can a dog have seizures from mold? Yes, a dog can definitely have seizures from mold. So can a human. What's the root cause of seborrheic dermatitis? So it's not one root cause. Remember, when we're talking about causation for autoimmune disease, what are they? What are the triggers? There's physical triggers, there are chemical triggers, and there are emotional triggers, right? So we see sometimes people will develop an autoimmune disease because of a severe trauma physically, car accident, major fall, something along that line. We see people develop autoimmune disease because of a major stress. They'll lose a loved one, lose a pet, lose their house to mold, something along that line. And then we see people develop autoimmunity as a result of chemical triggers. And chemical triggers, there's a lot of them, but I like to categorize chemical triggers into 4 categories. The first is food. The second is chemical exposures, and that could be heavy metals, it could be household cleaning products, it could be chemicals in your soaps, detergents, lotions, shampoos, sunscreens, etc. But chemicals nonetheless. And then the third trigger is microbes. So microbes, mold is a microbe, bacteria, fungal, parasitic, viral. We know all of these things trigger or can be triggers for autoimmunity. And then there's a fourth trigger, which is nutritional deficiencies. So when you hear me talk, any of those of you who have been watching me for any length of time, I've never changed this message. I'm probably the most consistent person, the most consistent doctor on the internet in terms of my message. It doesn't deviate because it's not wrong. I don't change it based on a whim. I don't change it based on a trend. I don't change it based on the ebb and flow, of the masses or of the popularity of something selling better or something selling more and jumping on a bandwagon. My message has never deviated. It is consistent. Food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficiencies are the 4 fundamental chemical triggers for autoimmunity. And if you're struggling, you need to have those categories tested, right? You've heard me say this, test, don't guess. It's so important. I wrote an entire chapter on that in my book, No Grain, No Pain. So this goes for any of you, because there's a lot of questions in the feed I didn't answer. But if you have an autoimmune condition, it doesn't matter what the name of the autoimmune condition is. If it's autoimmune, seborrheic dermatitis, psoriatic arthritis, psoriatic dermatitis, ankylosing spondylitis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, scleroderma, dermatomyositis, multiple sclerosis, Hashimoto's, Addison's disease, fill in the blank. If it's an autoimmune disease, you need to have those 4 categories checked, because the treatment for autoimmune disease, it's slightly variable, but for most forms of autoimmunity, the treatment is an addiction to lifelong medication, and the treatment is you being managed by some type of doctor for the rest of your life, but never finding the answers as to why the condition started in the first place. That's the treatment. It's lifelong management, lifelong dependency on medications. Many of those medicines are immune suppressing medications called biologics that we know can cause cancer. So if you want to trade autoimmune disease for cancer, more power to you. But if you want to know the real reason why it's there, you have to fundamentally investigate for those 4 categorical triggers, or you are not going to get anywhere and you're not going to find the progress that you want in your health. That's my opinion. That's been my observation over almost 24 years of practice and seeing thousands of cases of autoimmunity go quiescent. We can't use the word cure because everybody will attack us, but what do you call it when an autoimmune disease goes away and a person can live a healthy, happy life without medications because they change their diet and their lifestyle? I don't know. We could use the C word, but we'll just say use the word quiescence. Okay. A lot of questions about MTHFR. It's all hype. It's hype. Look, I was one of the first doctors to make the mistake. And I can admit from my mistakes, I can admit this is 20 years ago. We were doing, I actually worked with a lab in Colorado to help bring to the market the first genetic nutritional SNP test ever brought to the market. All the work was done, the scientific work was done. Largely, it was based on the work of a doctor, a PhD by the name of Bruce Ames, who's a brilliant man who had a lot of wonderful theories and a lot of wonderful research. And so we did MTHFR, MTR, MTRR, CBS, COMT, glutathione genes. We tested all these nutritional SNP genes, including MTHFR. And when we found people with the mutations, and we theoretically, because the theory was if you find the mutation, you supplement the mutation. So if they have an MTHFR mutation, you give the person methylfolate. If they have an MTR mutation, you give that person vitamin B12. If they have a CBS gene mutation, you give them vitamin B6, et cetera, et cetera. We didn't find clinical outcomes that were successful doing that. Like we did that for several years, did not find success in outcomes for people, didn't get better because they started taking folate because of an MTHFR. What we found was if you didn't change the person's diet and lifestyle, trying to treat their SNP with a vitamin or a mineral was a total waste of their money, was a total waste of resources, and a total waste of everyone's time. And it was a letdown because it didn't get people better. So all these people out there pawning you to buy supplements because you have a mutation, and claiming that your genetics are your problem, and claiming that if you just supplement your bad genes that you'll suddenly miraculously feel better, they're full of it. That's my opinion on it. Now, I mean, there's some good people out there talking about it in the proper context as well. So it's not like everybody out there's a charlatan, but you do have to watch out. What type of probiotic would you suggest for yeast overgrowth? I mean, a good one is S. boulardii, Saccharomyces boulardii, with bifido and lactobacillus. We have something called Biotic Defense with S. boulardii. It's a good probiotic for that. Yeah, I can't forget to mention dermatitis herpetiformis and celiac disease. You're right on. That's those other forms of autoimmune disease. I stopped gluten and journaling what I eat. Been eating now nothing but meat, dish, and some fruits. Everything else makes me feel sick. A regular blood panel didn't show anything at the ER. Typically, they won't. I mean, regular blood panels, CBCs, chemistry panels are normal for most people because the reference ranges have been skewed to reflect abnormal health. I mean, as we've gotten sicker as a society, the reference ranges have changed. And so many of these tests that are designed to pick up early nuance of illness don't. But if you feel really good on meat and some light fruits, it's just my opinion on the matter. A lot of people in the carnivore community, I believe personally, and I've seen it clinically, are in mold and don't know it. And so when they cut out plant-based foods, they feel so much better because many of the plant-based fibers and carbohydrates, they not only the person in mold, but they have mold in them. And so they're feeding mold inside, and that it's one of the reasons why they don't react well. Seen that trend tremendously. Can you help me know how to go back to good sleep? I'm exhausted all day. Check out our crash course on sleep. We have crash courses on most health topics. It's one of the things we have, guys. We have over 1,800 videos. I think 1,900 at this point on our YouTube channel. Many of them are long, detailed. You know, a lot of people get mad at me for this. They want a 3-minute solution for a 30-year problem. I do long form videos because I want to educate and I want to empower people that want the answer and they don't want to do the work to resolve the situation. Generally, that's general laziness. You have to be more interested in your own health than me. And so we put together long, well-produced videos with tremendous amounts of information, all for free for those of you. So if you ever have a specific question that I don't answer in one of these live Q&As, go do a search on our channel. You'll most likely find a crash course on it, and it might just save or change your life. Okay, I think I'm well over. We're 30 minutes over. So look, I want to just say thank you for your viewership. Thanks for participating. we are such a censored channel. And, you know, I want to just, if you find this helpful, if you find my show helpful, I'm going to ask a favor of you. I'm going to ask you for your support. What you can do to support us is you can hit the like button, you can hit the share, you can tag these videos and send them to people that that you think might get benefit from them, so that we can beat this shadow banning and the censorship. Because right now, our channel is growing slower than it ever has, and so the only way around that is you. You are the answer to that. So help me reach more people, and then we can all help save lives together. Thanks so much. Wish you all a very happy weekend, and we'll see you next Tuesday for another show. Take care.